Hello and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Martins. I'm here with Mike Wilkerson, who I forgot to ask if I spelt everything right in your name there. Good,
Yeah. Oh
excellent.
no, it's Stelium7
Oh,
with a U. You were
oh
close.
man,
I didn't
yeah.
notice it.
I apologize, and I actually did notice another place I spelt it wrong. My brain, like really late last night, I'm going, oh, two L's, darn it. Yeah, so now I missed. Okay, so I'm gonna just edit that quickly so people know how to find you. It's interesting. Your handle is very good for some reason. I always remember it with a quick mind, and that's not always the case. Handles are almost always not. Um, they can't come to your mind, but you just nailed it with your Stelium 7. And I think you told me while I set up Rockfin, why don't you tell me how that came about? You already mentioned it in.
Yeah, it was an accident, really. Well, I grew up with a mom who was an astrologer, so astrology was always a pretty integral part of my youth, and I was always fascinated by the concept of a stellium, which is when you have three or more planets in a sign or in a particular house, and it's just really like a focal point, a concentration of energy. And I have a 5-planet stellium in my 7th house, so I always like the number 7 as well. I don't know. Are we recording? Maybe this is good for for
This is
the.
good.
Oh,
This
this
is
is
good. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. We're
Yeah.
totally on.
So.
We're live.
So that was my email address for many, many years. And when I started a YouTube channel, I didn't know what to call it. And I just thought, oh, I'll just call it Stelium7. And I didn't ever think for a moment or anticipate that people would start to be calling me Stellium, which is it's kind of fun. All of my family members have SS as their initials, and mine are MW. So I'm like the oddball. And then a few months back, it occurred to me, wait a minute, I'm also an SS now. So,
Right, exactly. Stelium 7. There you
yeah.
go. Oh, that's really fun. Looks like we have a problem with streaming to Vigilante TV. Darn it. It worked last time, so I have no idea. We'll have to go back and just upload this to it later. We are live on Rockfin, and I have shared a link in the chat here if anybody would like to use that platform. And we're live on Rumble as well, so I can grab a link for that. Give me a second to make a probably rude noise here. They always come on. There it is. And I will grab this link. Always get my best numbers on Rumble these days, which is nice. That means people are going away from the mainstream platforms more so.
That's good.
Alrighty. Yeah, super good. And hello to people on Rockfin as well. Music Guru is there. A friend of yours, I think, Mike. Yeah, excellent.
Hey, bro.
Yeah, I recently downloaded his. What the heck is it called? It's music for the right hertz or something.
True solfeggio.
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
True solfeggio.
Right.
Yeah.
True
It's got
solfeggio.
number 2 coming out very soon. I got an early listen, and it's amazing. So.
Oh, fun. Okay, good. Well, I'll be on that one as well.
That.
Yeah. And we should plant a bug in Music Guru's conspiracy music guru's ears about an event that's going to take place in the UK coming up in September. And with any luck, we'll have you there, Mike.
Oh,
that'd be super good.
That would be fun. Yeah,
it would be
I
fun.
like to meet people in real life.
Yes, I know.
Just being behind a screen all the time.
Right. I'm grateful for the screens, but when it can go next level and be flesh and bones, and that's why I was really glad to meet you in Anarchapulco. I know we didn't have a lot of deep talks, but I was around you when you were having deep talks, so that I remember. In those nice, often early morning, everybody's out with their coffee and rubbing their eyes from the night at Max's bar the night before, where I didn't go, actually.
The mornings are great. Dip in the sea, a nice breakfast, hanging out with awesome people around the breakfast table, and then off to the conference. It was perfect.
It really was. Yeah, I loved your recap as well of Anarchapulco. That helped me a lot because there's so much that you miss when you're in those live settings. So many things happening at the same time and people I didn't really get to know. So yeah, that was great to get it through your eyes.
Yeah,
And
it was awesome to be able to be there and to meet so many people that I really admire, and to actually be able to hang out with them and get to know them and exchange ideas. It's really a special experience.
it was one of the warmest groups I've ever been part of. I have been playing and speaking at festivals for a lot of years as a musician. That's more how I was doing it in the earlier years. And I was always struck at how incredibly, what is the word? Just not warm, not friendly, not kind. And these are not even really like high level people. They're folk musicians, or they're, it's not like they're such a big name that they've earned that. But the snobbery and the, who are you, and all this kind of. I remember there was one time, I'll just say a really quick story. Then I walked into one of the backstage green rooms, and they were singing a song I just happened to know. So I jumped in and I started singing harmonies, thinking, "Oh yeah, this is so fun!" And I'm just like a little kid. Oh yay, I know the words. And you should have seen them glare at me and look at me and like there's some problem. And I'm just so grateful that this group was infinitely more open and humble, and great speakers would come up to me and introduce themselves. "Hey, I like your podcast." And I'd say, "Oh, what's your name?" And they're like, "Oh, Topher Gardner." I'm like, "Oh, I should have known that." So yeah, the humility goes a long way to
Yeah,
genuine
a
connection.
lot of humility, a lot of just openness to ideas. And I didn't know what to expect, from an Anarchapulco, an anarchist conference. I wasn't sure what the vibe of the people were going to be. Are these like, going to be like gun-toting, kind of people that hang out in the hills? Or it was such a nice, it was a family environment, children, and just peaceful and really great. So I
Yeah.
highly recommend it. If anyone wants to go to an awesome event, that's a good one.
Me
Are
as
you
well.
are you going to Music and Sky also? Are you
I
have
am
you
not. No, I'm
Oh,
heading
okay.
to Texas pretty soon. I'm actually going to be doing a live interview with Alex Zek, who's hosting me. So yeah, I had to pick my events, and I'm going to take
Hmm.
my son, and he likes to visit the open carry states, so that's he's pretty excited to get some cowboy boots and eat brisket.
And where's home for you? I don't even know what part of the world you're in.
Here in Manitoba, it's Winnipeg, Manitoba, in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, there you go. And you are in.
I'm on the Costa Blanca in Spain.
Nice. And how did you end up in Spain? Since we're just getting to know each other.
Well, let's see. I started as an exchange student in Italy in '97, and lived total of 3 years there. And then from there, I moved to Sweden, and I lived in Sweden for 10 years, and then moved down here 12 years ago. So I spent almost as much time in Europe as I did in the States. And
Fantastic.
yeah, and I did my chiropractic training in Sweden when I was up there, and that was a 5-year training. So that's what I do here in Spain. I'm practicing as a chiropractor, and all of the other stuff is just kind of on the side, hobbies, interests, and things that I dive into out of just pure interest or passion.
Right. Yeah, that's so fun. One of the bits of feedback that was given at the event at Anarchapulco, I have no idea if they're going to hear this or not, but that there was, so much variety in the education there and the presentations in a lot of different areas, and spirituality and the science and the medical side of things. And from your side, the history and geology, if that's what you spoke about. But there wasn't the physical, right? That the ability to develop yourself in a physical way, whether that's through chiropractic or some kind of, like I'm thinking of Matthew, who was there, and he had the two trees set up with the apparatus that you could go for a like kind of acrobatic swing in. Did
Hmm.
you did you catch that at all?
I saw it, but I didn't try it.
Okay,
Um,
I tried it. Yeah, I was really scared of it, so I
the
so I
flying.
thought, okay, The flying, exactly. Yeah, I was scared of it. So then I thought, well, I must do it since I'm scared of it. And I lasted 4 entire minutes until I was gonna the whole thing was gonna my
Oh yeah,
lunch was gonna come up. Yeah, yeah. But it was really good. I
that
was glad I tried it.
that kind of stuff doesn't usually bother me. I was a hang glider pilot for 10 years in California when I lived there. And I would, when I had enough altitude, I would do some acrobatics as well. So I loved, it's like being on a radical roller coaster ride, but you make the track as you go.
Right, right. There you
So
go. Yeah, that's not exactly my wheelhouse, but I do like to get out of my comfort zone, especially physically, because that's a good thing to do. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Mike's work, I'm just going to say for over a decade, he's worked as a chiropractor in Spain. He was just telling us where his mission has been to help improve health, one spine or mind and mind at a time. Mike has always asked unconventional questions as a teen computer hobbyist turned hacker in the early 80s. His thirst for deeper knowledge led to wild adventures with some of the top hackers in the nation. In 1985, the fun ended with a brief incarceration for his infiltration of computer servers at Microsoft and 3 other Seattle corporations. Definitely would like to hear more about that. And has interest in examining the unquestionables never waned. In the decades that followed, Mike evolved from mischievous hacker to benevolent backcracker, and in recent years, on independent as an independent researcher. His research and presentations are available on his channel, Stelium7. I'm going to grab that link and put it in the chat as well. So, super glad to have you here, Mike. I'm glad we are here. Do you want to start off with a story about how you ended up incarcerated? I have one too.
wow. Yeah, as a teen, I was fascinated with computers and got into the telecommunications side of it long before the internet existed as we know it today. It was modems and dial-ups, and so I was already doing that when I was 12 and 13, and eventually figured out how to make phone calls for free, and I could access computers and bulletin boards all around the nation. And then I started to meet people with similar interests, and that led to some kind of crazy adventures that I've written a book about. The book is written, but it's not polished yet totally. And the marketing side is something that I've been dreading for years. So it's like 35 years in the making and still hasn't been published. So that particular project I seem to have a really hard time completing, but it's an amazing story. Anyone who's heard it is like, this should be a movie, because the wild things that were happening. But yeah, so when I was 18, I just turned 18, I got caught in Seattle, and I had been getting into all kinds of computers that were not mine. And eventually it caught up with me, and there was a court case, and it was kind of a big deal. It hit nationwide, broadcasting and lots of front page articles, and then I started a new chapter of my life, because I wasn't going to be doing things with computers anymore. I didn't trust myself. I thought the temptation would be too great. So I just started doing odd jobs and worked as a temporary secretary, and worked in restaurants and in a deli and all kinds of different things, and just kind of started a normal life, because from basically 13 to 18, my life was anything but normal. And then, just kind of went into the life of a normie, but I didn't exactly grow up a normie. I'm fascinated by your channel and the theme of it. I didn't know about your channel even after we met in Mexico. I watched a few interviews, and I love the idea of the hero's journey and the archetypes. This is something I was deeply interested in my 20s. I was reading the works of Joseph Campbell and Jean Shimoda. I don't know if you're familiar with her. Goddesses in every man, and gods in every man, goddesses in every woman. It's the idea that all the archetypes are contained within us, and so I very much identified with the hero's journey as a young man, not just because of the crazy things that were happening to me, but also out of interest when it came to reading and books and growing up with parents who were into astrology and the tarot, and my mom at one point was a book buyer for a New Age bookstore. So she fed lots of interesting books to me at a time when I was very, open-minded and curious. And so the hero's journey for me, I mean, I always, from the time I was a little kid, was a bit of an outcast. I had an unusual upbringing. I had a very different name. my name was Princeton when I was that was my birth name, and then went by Prince because everyone always shortens the name. And when I hit grade school, it was a little too hard to deal with the pressure that I got from that. So even though I loved the name, I ended up leaving it behind. And basically alternative everything was kind of my upbringing when it came to everything from diet to mindset to religious perspectives. And so that just carried over into my interest in computers, and eventually, I got smack on the hand. So I went to jail for that. I was 18. I had just turned 18, so I was charged as an adult, and it was Microsoft, Sunstrand, Kenworth Trucking, Boeing. It was kind of a crazy thing. So there's a little Wikipedia entry on me, but it.
There you go.
What more can I say?
Nice.
It was kind of it's an interesting chapter in my life, and of many.
There you go. Nice. Yeah, I was right away when you started talking about it, I wanted to read the archetype that was there, or that's just how my brain works, is looking for those kind of patterns. And so my question right away wondered if it was the rebel archetype, because it's the one that doesn't mind getting a smack, doesn't mind risking getting a smack, I should say, and that can be part and parcel. If
you're talking about like your quiz on your webpage.
Yeah. Did you do it, by the way?
I took that. Yeah, I did the quiz. Yeah,
What was your?
I was the nurturer.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
yeah.
interesting. I mean, you described it in your little short video about that archetype. You said it was the last of the first half of the cycle.
Exactly.
So that in the zodiac, that would be the sign of Virgo, obviously the sixth house. And I'm a Virgo, so so that fit. And Virgos are very much nurturers, and oftentimes they'll go into healing professions and that sort of thing. So I've focused a lot of my life on that. I studied massage when I was in my 20s, and then went on to chiropractic, and that's what I do for a living. Is I touch people and try and help them in both with the up here and in the body. And so it felt appropriate, the nurture.
Fantastic.
But
that's so cool that you did it. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know what the other 7 are, because you said it was your own take on the archetypes. And
yeah, the archetypes came through me at a very poignant moment of loss when my father died. And it was a couple of years later, after my mom died, they both kind of went as a pair, that I started looking and seeing, are these archetypes in fact the hero's journey, and not just a soup of archetypes like I had been experiencing them. They were all there in varying degrees. I'd already done some work on it. And then when I conceived of the possibility through what's her name? I don't know if I can see the book. I'll have to get that out of my memory, but she wrote a book on the archetypes of the hero's journey as well. And so after I read that, I'm like, I wonder if my archetypes are a journey. And within 5 minutes, I could see how they exactly lined up perfectly as a sequence that was meaningful in a particular order. And then I found myself on the journey, and I made one of the biggest steps I'd ever made in my life, or one of the big steps I've made in my life, and I was able to make huge changes just by finding myself on that journey. So that's what gave me the clue that this was very important, not just to know who you are, but where you are, what's behind you, what's in front of you. And yeah, the nurture is one that's really super close to my heart. And as a matter of fact, I've just created a training on the nurturer specifically. So see if you could relate to this. That there's a phenomena I call the nurturer's pendulum swing, and it's where you go from helping. Right away, you can see it. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
know where this is going.
Yeah, yeah, helping
Uh,
everyone, crashing, burning, helping no one, telling everyone to get away, recovering, helping everyone, crashing, burning.
fits and starts, as they say.
Exactly,
Like, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And it can really, it's very strange for the nurturer because the will is to serve and help, but because it can be, from a shadow place, it injures you, then you develop a very strong aversion to it, even so much so as disowning it. That's where I was at when I found my nurture archetype. It was disowned. I didn't even see
Mm.
that about myself. I had no persona whatsoever around being a helping spirit, but there it is in technicolor. And now, many years later, it's a lot of those nuances have come clear. So you might want to join that training to get some tips. It
I'll
goes
look
beyond
into
the
it.
surface,
Sounds
let's say.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. It's a free one. There's going to be a course after. I will share a link. I'll grab for people that would like to join. I just opened it up yesterday. It's going to take place May 15. All right. So that's enough about that. We were going to talk today about history, about a word you coined called geobiology, which I really like, and
Biogeology.
cosmology. Pardon me, I got backwards. Biogeology. There you go. There you go.
Works both
Jinx.
ways.
Creative
Yeah.
license here. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And yeah, the alternative hidden histories that, of course, we haven't been seen: gigantism, catastrophism. Really enjoyed the video about petrification. That is so different than anything we've been told.
Mm.
And yeah, I would like to know the implications of that. Where would you like to start with all of that?
Well, the whole thing started for me about 8 or 9 years ago. I met you mentioned Alex before. I'd already from my 20s been interested in the whole conspiracy landscape, and my father gave me a couple books, Behold the Pale Horse, and another one called The Emperor Wears No Clothes. And that opened my eyes to a lot of the different power structures that existed in the world, and the interlocking societies, both secret and open, and and how the educational systems were hijacked, and the medical system, and so for me, I've always kind of had an open mind to a lot of that stuff, and I went through different phases where I would feel higher or lower degrees of paranoia, and like maybe it's time to head for the hills and collect weapons or something like that. But it wasn't my interest or my style, so I never you know did that. I decided I'm just gonna go on and live my life and do my best to try and help others and leave the world a little better place than it would have been if I wasn't in it. And that was kind of my motivation. I figured a lot of that stuff is on a level that it's difficult to affect any kind of change other than in your own sphere. So that kind of thinking wasn't new to me. But when I met Alex, I had already been digging into a lot of different subjects that were kind of unraveling the tapestry that was my upbringing and my worldview, and looking into the music industry and Hollywood, and how compromised they were, and the deep cultic influences in those industries. And as I was going through that, that's when I met Alex, and we started checking off the boxes. 9/11, and you name it. And this is obviously before the pandemic came into our experience. And so he started asking me at one point if I'd ever looked into the flat Earth thing, and my first reaction was, oh no, he didn't just go there. Of all places, that's like the one thing that you're just an idiot if you're even pondering it or contemplating that the earth might be flat. And so I just brushed it off, and it took him bringing it up again a few weeks later before I decided to put in what I thought was going to be 5, maybe 10 minutes of time to pull up the evidence to debunk this ridiculous idea. And each of the things that I brought him got shot down pretty handily, and he started, presenting me with different examples of things that didn't really match up. So I don't identify personally as a flat earther because I think it's a term that's very divisive and
Weaponized.
weaponized. It's a false dichotomy that's specifically designed, I think, to get people arguing amongst each other, and that really the nature of the earth might be unknowable. Ultimately, we don't, unless you can get outside of something, you can't really know what it is. And doesn't seem to be anybody doing that right now. But I think ultimately that the true shape of the earth is a synthesis probably of both a sphere and flat and possibly a toroid. And I have lots of different ideas about it, but I think the important thing when it comes to that is the intellectual exercise of going through the process of finding out, like, all these things that I believe, that I grew up believing and that I thought were truth. Do I really know them to be true, or have I just been told they're true? And that's where, the studies that I had both in high school and in college were beneficial, because I learned logic. I learned rhetoric, logic, grammar, these different bits that help you to analyze arguments and to look at them and judge them based on their merits. And then going through chiropractic college, there was heavy emphasis on the scientific method as well, and how that should be done properly. and so when this came along, instead of pushing it away, and I'm talking about earth shape again, I thought, well, this is a fun thing to ponder. And the deeper I got into it, the more I realized this is a truly deep subject, and it's not dumb. And the things that we were taught are truth and are the proof that we live on an earth that's, the way they tell us it is. Those things are debunkable, and they shouldn't be. So it's like, so it was a huge upheaval for me, because it came on the heels of these other things that I'd been diving into that had me really questioning the nature of our reality and what's really going on here. And then when I got into the earth shape thing, it took me 6 months really to wrap my head around it before I was confident, at least that I knew what it wasn't. And that was pre algorithms. So, it was developing organically. When people put out good material, it was recommended, and others, liked it and shared it. And there was a natural growth that was happening to the channels that were sharing that information. And if you know about the subject at all, and you know what happens when you do searches now, you just get a bunch of BS that's all designed to make you think that it's a ridiculous idea that's not even worth your time pondering. And I never understood that, because I thought, wow, this is a great tool for debate skills, in school. Like, one side takes the ball and the other side takes flat, and see who wins, but no, everything that they do is to get you to not look at it. And I thought, that's fascinating. So I'm always interested in looking where they tell me I shouldn't be looking. It's just kind of who I've been my whole life, really.
Yeah, and that's the rebel archetype, by the way. So there might be some default in that one. We are all archetypes on the hero's journey at the same time, which is why I do the quiz. So there can be some measure of focus and points of entry for doing work on awakening those shadows. But yeah, especially your upbringing. And isn't that classic? Sorry, when I geek out on the archetypes here, but isn't that classic how you had more of a rebel upbringing, right? Your parents were already outside the box, and they're already feeding you, books and knowledge about something alternative than what the mainstream has created, and then you made your way into the more normal world from there,
Yeah,
and doing things that
definitely.
were right,
Yeah,
yeah.
and as far as the archetypes go, I mean, the one that I identified most with growing up was the trickster, was Mercury, Hermes, um, and the different gifts that he brought and gave to humanity were things that I identified with closely, and I was fascinated by the tarot as well, because this idea of the fool's journey, that not the first card but the zero card is the fool, and the fool is stepping off the cliff, looking off at the sunset and not really paying attention to where he's going, and boom, the adventure begins, because he goes over the cliff. And um, I when I made the decision to move to Europe, it was, actually the second time, not the first time. First time I went for school, then I moved back and I finished my degree in California at UCSB. That was, I wanted a classics degree, but they didn't offer it. I didn't have any clue what I wanted to do with myself when I grew up. Still don't. But I knew that I wanted to study a lot of different subjects to just get a feel for what was out there. And so I started as a philosophy major. They didn't have classics. So when I went to Italy, I switched my major to Italian, and that allowed me to just take whatever I wanted to while I was there. So when I moved back to the States after that, I decided I was going to go back to Italy after I graduated, and sold my car, my van, my hang glider, my motorcycle, I just like all my toys, and bought a one-way ticket to Italy. I figured I would teach English when I got there. And when I did that, when I made the decision to do that, I was sitting high up on the mountains that I would usually jump off of in Santa Barbara and fly. And I was thinking about this idea of flying, and how it's really a metaphor for the hero's journey, every single flight, because you prepare, you have to train. You don't just like grab a hang glider and jump, it's a good way to die. And you've got to be, very familiar with your gear and set the thing up. And then you get up to launch, and you need to know the conditions and the micrometeorology of it. And then have that courage and faith in your equipment that you're gonna jump and fly and not die, And so I thought, well, that's kind of a metaphor for life, and a metaphor for this thing that I was about to do, which was to move back to Europe. And I didn't know where I was going to go at that point. I had just turned 30, and so I wrote a poem. I don't know if it's a short one. I see if I can remember
lay
it
on us.
properly.
Yes, lay it on us.
So it goes. It's called "The Void," and it goes like this. If I can remember it, it says, "I have come to the edge at last, with thoughts racing and heart beating wildly. Just a few steps. I don't know. This is it, I tell myself. This is where I discover who I truly am. Just a few steps, and then I'll know. Am I meant to fly, or to die like so many broken heroes dashed upon the rocks of the great abyss below? And there, in that eternal instant, I look down, only to see that the choice has already been made. The hero has just taken his first steps forward."
Wow. Oh my gosh, how much synchronicity is this right now? Which is a big part of your fascination as well. That's what a beautiful poem. Got shivers all over in the
Oh, thank you.
resonance of it. Yeah, very
Yeah,
nice.
it was it's a lot to leave, and you never know, where it's going to go. I never moved back. So
Right.
sometimes you make choices that change the whole course of your life, and that definitely happened with me.
Yeah, and what a great metaphor of just stepping and knowing, because that they don't call it risk for nothing. I was just talking with somebody about that this morning, that you literally don't know. Things could fail, whether it's your equipment or your judgment, or the what, elements change suddenly. All of that is possible. And that's what stops most people from actually taking the risk of going on their hero's journey and putting themselves out there and doing something that they're called to do, which is not everybody's called to, jump out of airplanes and that kind of thing. But it is a good metaphor for how we feel when we face those kind of risks.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really fun.
Yeah.
I like all
So
that.
yeah. So back to your original question.
Mhm.
So meeting Alex got me, looking at the world through new eyes and really examining things that I had taken for granted as true and long ago proven. And the more I dug into them, the more I realized that there were a lot of things that weren't. And I was a big space junkie and interested in everything sci-fi, and loved Star Trek and Star Wars, and so if if someone had come to me earlier and started talking like that, I would have just brushed him off as an idiot, as a lunatic, and but I was already digging into a lot of things, and aware that things are not necessarily as they appear. And the more I looked into that one, the more it just started to change my whole perception of reality. And that got me looking differently at lots of ologies, not just cosmology or, astronomy and these kinds of things, but also geology, because I realized that, well, when you start looking at the Big Bang and then gravity and uh, light years and all these things that at least I grew up taking for granted were real, um, it's not necessarily the case. And so that opens the door to a whole lot of new learning. And there were so many things that I was uninterested in as a kid, because I just thought, oh, that's the most boring thing ever. Geology, rocks, digging up rocks, or archaeology, there with the brushes and sweeping away the dirt, and looking at stuff that people, some settlement from thousands of years ago. I was like, for me, it was all about the future. It was all about getting off the planet before it was destroyed by a comet and all these kinds of things. And so I didn't have an interest in that. And when it came to, the perennial teachings, the philosophy and the religious perspectives that I grew up with, it was something that always gelled with what I was studying as far as like quantum physics. And I always felt like every time I got deeper and deeper into the science thing, it was looping back around on the ancient teachings. And I grew up believing that there was a thread that went through them all, and that none of them was completely right. And so I was a selective sifter, and I would take what I wanted from one thing and from another. And ultimately, I didn't know the word syncretism, but I was just a natural syncretist. And I have a very intuitive side as well. I'm extremely logical, left brain, typical Virgo kind of person, but I also have moon in Pisces, so I'm a very emotional person as well, and I have a lot of intuition. And I think my gifts is pattern recognition, and obviously sometimes we can think we're recognizing a pattern that doesn't actually exist. That's called apophenia. Or we can see something, have a visual pattern, and think that something's there that isn't real. That's called pareidolia. So I was aware of these things long before I ever started looking at geology with new eyes. And so I started to, initially I did an investigation into a mountain here in Spain. It's called Montgo. It's a 5-kilometer long mountain, 3 miles roughly, 750 meters high. And it looks a lot like an elephant. And it's kind of a silly idea to think that a mountain might have once been an elephant. That would require a completely different worldview. And interestingly enough, that worldview is in alignment with ancient mythological views and even religious texts, which is that there were great beings that once lived. You know, even the mainstream geological model acknowledges megaflora and megafauna. You know, that everything was much bigger back in the day. They talk about the dinosaurs and meter large dragonflies and that kind of thing. But obviously they're putting it in this context of 14 billion year timelines and, you know, supernovas and all, you know, and then everything just randomly bangs together and then boom, here we are. You know, as Rob Skiba used to say, from goo to you by way of the zoo. And so I've got threads going in a lot of different directions, but as I investigated this mountain, initially it was just a fun exercise, intellectual exercise. I got on Google Earth. I'm looking at it from lots of different angles, and I started to recognize that there were a bunch of different things that actually lined up with the gross anatomy of a creature that could be an elephant. It could be some other mammal. Looks a lot like an elephant though. And so I started pulling up elephant anatomy and looking at elephant skulls and looking at, there's a cave in the mountain that's exactly where an eye socket should be. If this portion that looks like the head is actually a head, there's a cave exactly there. So that was fun because I'd been up to it a bunch of times and I never really pondered that it might be something, you know, crazy like that. So I decided to approach it in a really analytical way, and I pulled out anatomy books and I got online with 3D anatomy, and I had a laundry list of things that I would expect to find if there was any truth to the idea. And then I went up to document that investigation, because initially it was just an overview, and you know, the head was in the right place, and there was curving in where the head meets the shoulders, and there's a deep canyon between the legs. And you know, it was just like after an hour or two, I was finding a whole bunch of things that lined up that shouldn't be there. You know, it's like after a while you start to have to look at the probability of something, and so that quite unexpectedly became a 2-year investigation. There's a multi-part video series on my channel called Unveiling a Titan. 7 chapters to that. They're about a half an hour long, most of them. And yeah, investigating the eye, investigating the ear, looking at the histology of the mountain, which is the medical term for tissues. And by 2 years in, I had documented over 50 anatomical correlations, both on the micro and the macro. I got a microscope, 1000x microscope, to examine the stones that were on and, you know, comprising the mountain, and the number of things that lined up and the specificity of those things is just either the universe is playing a joke, or we're in some kind of a simulation that starts to adapt itself as you look at things, which is definitely a possibility, or there's something to it. And most of the people who get through the series, that's the full series there. That's the playlist. Yeah, there's a 90-second just little visual teaser that presents really all of the data that I present in the first 4 videos is in that 90-second teaser, just to kind of give people visual impressions before introducing the ideas to them. I suppose you could think of it as brainwashing, but it's just to help people to, you know, I come from a medical background, so the terminology is is easy for me and to remember it. And, you know, for example, the socket there, obviously those tusks, by the way, those are Photoshopped. It is Photoshop, but it has to be. So you can see the cave there. In the eye alone, there's about 20 anatomical correlations, and some of them are highly specific. And I document those all with photos and on site with video, and I'm comparing it side by side with the anatomy. So it's not like, hey, it kind of looks like it, doesn't it? It's like there's a ton of stuff that lines up. And so that was how the whole channel began. And it's interesting going back to astrology, because an important, you know, part of my life growing up. I went once to an astrologer in Seattle, and a guy, he had written several books. Jeff Green was his name, and he worked out of a bookstore in the university district. And I dropped off my chart, and I was just like, hey, you know, curious to know what you think I'd be good at. You know, like what do you think I should do? Because I wanted another opinion beside my mom, you know, who was the resident astrologer at home. And he came back with something that kind of puzzled me, and it wasn't until a couple years ago that I realized how right he'd been. He just said photojournalist. It's like, you should be a photojournalist. And I'm not much of a journalist as far as writing articles and that sort of thing, but the channel has really been documenting my adventure as I've pondered these different ideas that many would consider harebrained. And I've done that, you know, documented that both in sharing my thinking around the idea and my approach to it, but also with, you know, photography and video and so that's, you know, the channel is a real mishmash of a lot of different things. There's some stuff about the hacking on there. There's the Titanology. I coined the term Titanology just tongue in cheek, right? Like somebody asked me, like, what are you? You know, because they were trying to figure out what my background was, and I jokingly said I'm a Titanologist. And later I coined the term biogeology. And the reason well, the term was already being used, but I appropriated it. It has to do with an exchange between the lithosphere and the ecosphere down here, and you know, exchange of materials. And I thought this is a much better way to really distinguish between what we're told about geology, how old things are, how they form, you know, what the underlying processes are, versus alternative views and the evidence that may or may not be there for those alternative views. And a lot of that has to do with petrification, especially rapid petrification, because, you know, we know that organic things can petrify. We have petrified forests. There are creatures that can be found completely petrified. But those are, the timelines we're given are millions, if not hundreds of millions of years. And these are timelines that nobody can witness them. No one can. They can theorize about them, and then they can make claims about dating, or they can infer and draw conclusions based on chemistry. But ultimately, you know, they're making a lot of claims that are not substantiated.
It's dodgy. Yeah. I had a professor in anthropology, which archaeology was part of, and it was on epistemology. How do you know what you know? Let's question how you know what you know. And that was the threads started unraveling for me, and realizing, and of course, every time they make a claim about a date of the age of something, it's got a astronomical plus or minus on it. Right. So when you consider even the range, and then, you know, in short, do you think the history, the history is different, but the geology is a lot shorter than we've been led to believe? And why would that be?
Yeah, I think it's much, much shorter. I mean, there are young Earth creationist Christians that believe the Earth is 5,000 or 6,000 years old. I don't know how they arrive at those numbers. I don't have a clue, and I'm not asserting any particular age to things. I just think in general, things happen over a much shorter period of time than we've been given as far as the mainstream model goes. And certain things like when it comes to petrification, there's a whole variety of different ways in which things can petrify. This is one of the things that I talked about in Mexico. My talk focused primarily on the evidence for the great trees. Think avatar-sized trees that were a mile wide or larger at the base and stretched up who knows how far. Is there actual empirical evidence that such a thing once existed? Can we see the signs of that? And how could that have possibly come about? And a lot of that is theory, and catastrophism. You look into these different the mythological and historical perspectives surrounding, the rise and fall of empires or civilization, because even the mainstream geological model talks about 5 different great dyings off, where, there's the comet strike or the asteroid strike that supposedly wiped out the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. That's just one of 5 different ones that they've identified. There's the one that took out all the trilobites, and so they've got these names, and they've got, they give us dates based on their chemistry and their spectroscopy, and then they have the sedimentary layering, and then they claim the age of things based on which layer they're found in. But you also encounter circular reasoning, where they're claiming the age of the layer based on which fossils they're finding in the layer. So there's a lot of different things that are now peddled as fact that were hotly debated, and then eventually, no, this is what we're going with. And I don't know what your background is, if you've studied formally, but if you get into the scientific method and peer review, and the gold standard, which is the double-blind randomized controlled trial, or the meta study, what you're looking at ultimately is peer review. So if you have an idea that's incredibly destabilizing for a particular paradigm, and the peers that are going to be reviewing your idea have a vested interest in not having their paradigm crushed, chances are you're not going to get published, right? Like, if 20 years ago, if you tried to go and say Einstein was wrong, or gravity doesn't exist the way we were taught, good luck. Even today, you're not going to have a whole lot of luck, getting those ideas through. So it's been interesting as a chiropractor. The whole profession has been under attack for a century from the American Medical Association, and there's a landmark lawsuit that was brought against the AMA, which the AMA lost for antitrust violations, because they've been trying to eliminate my profession for decades, and they were jailing chiropractors for practicing medicine without a license, and all sorts of things that are just part of the historical record now, but most people are unaware of them, and they don't realize how those events have shaped the world and our perception of things like health, and what it means to be healthy, and how health is achieved. That we have a paradigm that's not based on reality at all, in my opinion, when it comes to health. So it's just an example of the ways in which the peer review process, or academia in general, can be used for narrative control and not much more.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. When there's a group of people that are, like you say, are invested, that it would be, over their lifetime, their credibility, resources that they've pumped towards that, resources they depend on. If that paradigm was to fall through, then they couldn't continue what they're doing. All kinds of, the house of cards starts to fall apart. So yeah, many people that try to bring forward revolutionary ideas, it won't take off until they're past, right? That's generally been the way it's gone. I was just, by the way, looking for, I did find one of your videos called Talking Titanic Trees, and this image came up. Is that something that you're talking about right now, or is that different?
Well, this is something, I think Chad Williams might have had that photo I think it's
Okay.
interesting. It's looking at, you've got volcanoes. I mean, one of my theories is that volcanoes, maybe not all of them, but many of them are the remains of trees. And, we have lava tubes and these snaking, network of tube structures that transport lava. Question is, how did those really form? And my suspicion is that whatever caused the damage that you can see very clearly across the realm, like if you're looking on Google Earth and you look at something like the Grand Canyon, what you're seeing is what's known as a Lichtenberg figure, which is, if you think of lightning or a tree structure, the branching, the way the way our lungs are branch off into ever smaller channels. That's what a Lichtenberg figure is. It's got that branching fractal quality to it, and that's something that is a sign of electromagnetic or plasma activity that's scarred the Earth, and we can find examples of that all over the realm. The Grand Canyon being the biggest of them, and that is something that you can experiment with in a laboratory. People take electrodes to wood and burn these shapes into the wood, and with that burning comes an alignment of different elements along those lines as well. So the evidence for the great trees, I've done multiple live streams. There's a ton of it. It's not just this looks like a tree. There's like amazing things and none of them in and of themselves are conclusive proof that those trees existed, but each of them is a data point. And if you start to look at those data points as a whole, as a gestalt, you get a pretty undeniable image of a past that has been told to us was fairy tale or myth. And now we're way more sophisticated than the ancients were, and we don't try to anthropomorphize the nature, because we're so rational now. And
Yeah, right.
so I think I've come to the conclusion that most of what they give us in the sci-fi fantasy stories in Hollywood has a degree of truth to it, and what we're told is real is the real fantasy.
Right. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, so that picture, to me, when I see that, the first thing I think of is the great trees were taken down. If you want to refer to the Book of Enoch or the Book of Jasher, they talk about the Titans laboring at the trees and bringing down the trees because God requested that, I guess. And then you have this idea of major cataclysm. And I think that the volcanoes, there's radioactive material there that it's burbling and bubbling, and every once in a while it comes to the surface for one reason or another. But it's just an idea that I toy with. There's a lot when it comes to the trees that seeing is believing. And I'm very excited because I was invited to Music and Sky to present, and I decided to lengthen the trip. So I'll be going to Colorado and meeting with Hangman. He's got a channel. It's called Hangman 1128, and he's been doing boots on the ground investigation of the evidence for the trees for the last 7 years or so. And he's got by far and away the best visual evidence, the most compelling for their existence. And I've been referring a lot to his channel over the years as I've covered these topics. So he and I are going to travel together. We're going to go to South Dakota and Colorado, and we're going to see some of these amazing sites and document them. And it'll give me an opportunity to interview him. And he has an incredible rock garden at his home of just amazing specimens that he's collected that illustrate all the different manifestations of the trees and how they petrify and how they break down as they're breaking down, and what they look like in varying degrees of petrification. And the conclusion that he's come to is that basically our entire periodic table of elements is coming from the trees. And I think it's very likely that that's true. Yeah. Rip Rob
Interesting.
Skiba, rest in peace. He was a wonderful
Yeah.
man. I got to meet him in Denver years ago, and just really kind and incredibly knowledgeable. And he was influential for me in the beginning of these investigations, because of the work that he did with the weather balloons and the high altitude footage, and going across the which Lake Michigan, I guess, to in the boat, seeing the Chicago skyline from the far side of the lake, which at that distance you shouldn't be able to see all of it or maybe any of it. And he was a great man. It's a shame he's gone.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I was just going to say about the trees that the gigantic trees, the star forts, and I think I've seen a little bit about that on your channels, have a tree like as if they're a tree base, right? That they radiate out like the roots of trees do. Do you suspect those are trees? Were trees?
I think there are actual maps that show like pyramids atop stumps, like they're line drawings, of star forts. When you've got the basic star fort, which is like the 4-pointer, and then they expand and they get larger and larger from there. A lot of people don't realize it, but all the old world cities are all star citadels. These are walled cities that, if you look at the oldest maps of the cities, you can see that all across the realm, on every continent, they're exhibiting the exact same features. So there was a realm-wide civilization that I think was far greater than ours in size, in scope, in technology as well. And the star forts are a real clue to that. A lot of people are looking into the World's Fairs and looking at the anomalies of the great architecture that's in places that it shouldn't be, and that was supposedly built in incredibly short periods of time and made out of weak materials, but yet the buildings are like on the scale of something you would see in Rome. So those are anomalous, but the star forts that's a huge anomaly, because there are literally thousands and thousands of them on every continent. And they have each one has its own little historical tale, but taken as a whole, you're looking at the remnants of something very great that once existed. And yeah, I think that they're always near a water source. There's a good chance, I think, that they were built on top of the remains of the trees. And you're going to have what they call artesian wells, artesian, and so I've shown examples even with smaller trees where they can tap into the groundwater and actually have channels of water coming up through the tree, where if you hit it with an axe, it starts to spurt water like a fire hydrant.
Wow.
Got video clips of that. Sometimes it'll come out of the knot of a tree, so the water is working its way up through the tree, and then it's just like in a permanent waterfall coming from within the tree. And so if you imagine that on a much larger scale, then you would have infinite water sources that could provide never-ending water to cities. That I lived in Rome for 2 years, and Rome has amazing fresh water coming out of fountains all over the city, and those fountains just run infinitely. It's like, where's that coming from? Well, if you think of a tree with roots extending down into the waters of the deep, then it's not so far-fetched.
Right. Fascinating. Yeah, that's they don't want us to know about how much good water there is, and it's not even that there is; it's that's they're being made. What's your take on that as a more of a realmer? If we leave that FE phrase out of it, but what
Hmm.
would be your take on where all of that fresh potable water is coming from? Is it still because
I
the
think the waters of the deep are a very real thing. Um,
Mhm.
as far as what the shape is, are we in a toroid, or is it a flat disk? Is there an underworld? Is it hollow? Is it concave? There are all these different theories out there, and I think they're all fun to ponder. And it's interesting to look at the evidence. I'm not married to any of them. I'm definitely a tried and true globe skeptic. I've seen no evidence of the globe as we were told. Um, but
Right, but just about the water, say the conventional
yeah.
explanation is or the unconventional, conventional explanation is that's the mantle of the earth being a fire, and it creates gases, and gases, one of the products of gas, emissions is going to be the, creation of water, and that's how you end up with, like, fresh new water being created at all times, so n I is would that be the truth in a realm model as well?
I don't know.
Yeah. Or just like I
I
know you don't know, but, like, I'm just curious if
yeah.
there is a thought, how they like, where would they think the water comes from if there's no core mantle that's on fire? Or is there does the
Well,
toroidal
they're
mantle
talking about oceans of water being found in the deep, and but it's mixed with sand, and I saw an article just the other day talking about that subject. So I think they're hinting at the waters of the deep, that it's possible that our continents themselves are just floating on these
floaters?
these great waters, and makes sense if the great trees are comprising our continents, then maybe there's these waters that are floating the continents. There's a interesting video
It's
of a
just
submarine. Have
Mhm.
you seen that, where they go down to the bottom of the sea or the ocean, and then they see a lake at the bottom of the ocean, and they try and descend into this lake, but the mineral content it's so thick that they basically the submarine just like bounces off of it, and then ripples go out to the edge, just like we would see at the shoreline here. I suppose that could be fake, but it seemed pretty real. So who knows what's down there? It's fun. There's so many. This place is so mysterious. Like when you first go through this process of like, oh, okay, maybe space is fake and they're lying about this, and it's all Hollywood fantasy. It can leave you a little depressed if that was a big part of your way of seeing the universe, because then it's like, okay, well, we're in a fishbowl, but the more you dig into things and the more you learn, this place is far more far out and interesting than that model ever could have provided us with.
Mhm. Yeah, not boring.
I've learned more in the last 5 years and encountered incredible teachers that I wish I had known of when I was in my 20s, because I spent so much time studying stuff that I now consider to be falsehoods. And I just in the last 2 years I came across the work of Walter Russell as an example, and Rudolf Steiner, and these great thinkers that wrote hundreds of books, in some cases that it's just like we're not taught about this stuff at all. So um, every day's a new adventure trying to take it in and relearn, but it's also daunting, when it comes to matters of religion. And, I cast out the Bible and the Quran and these other things as superstition. And yeah, they held grains of truth, but it's not like I need to pore over the texts and really understand them to make sense of what's going on here in this realm. But I had to swallow my pride when I started looking into the earth-shaped topic and realize that there's a whole lot that I don't know, and there seems to be all kinds of things lining up historically with these different texts that I thought were archetypes or myth or parable or just fantasy, and I don't think that anymore.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a liberating thing. So the one thing I was thinking about with the water, it makes sense that we would be floating continents, but it's all salt water, not fresh water. And when, waterfalls go off or springs, it can be literally anywhere. There's a beautiful spot where I used to go to a festival, and it had this incredible little tiny spring-fed lake, and it was always crystal clear, and you could drink right out of there. And it was a beautiful, like, no smell whatsoever. It was constantly being refreshed from the earth.
Mm.
And it is like, where is that coming from? Right? Like, we need to know.
Mm.
And our controllers don't want us to know that that's happening. So that's
Well,
very
and
cool.
water itself is so incredibly far out. I just learned, in the last few years about the fourth phase of water, structured water. I'd learned a little bit about it from the work of Masaru Emoto years ago. Was it The Secret or something he was in, showing how thoughts and emotion can affect water as it's freezing. And then we have the work of Veda Austin now that basically took his work to the next level. And is it Pollack who has the theories related to structured water, and that all of our, the interior linings of our body, when it comes to our capillaries and our mucous membranes, all of that, they're all coated in layers of structured water, like chia seed, when it's been soaked. And so, and learning about Victor Schauberger and vortexing of water, and these are the kinds of people I'm talking about. Like, most people know of Tesla as Tesla cars. They don't know anything about Nikola Tesla. I'm not even sure if Nikola Tesla really existed. But he could be a fictitious character. There seem to be a number of those floating around. But Victor Schauberger definitely existed, and he's kind of like the Tesla of water. He's just a wealth of information about how this place is really working. And there's so much so much to learn and so much to know. It's
Indeed, there is. And so, how has it changed you internally? How's it changed the way that I think you've talked about some of it already, but I'm just curious about the transformation that's occurred, maybe even at a spiritual level. How has it changed your relationship with life itself, or the nature of a God? I know I've a friend, Mark Archer. Now he corrects me every time I say the word God, and is trying to get me to say life, which I fully agree with. Actually, I'm just aware that he doesn't like the word God, so I keep using it as a brat. But what's your perspective on all of that, and how has your research changed you?
I always believed in a God, but I had an amorphous view of it. Like, it was the Force, like something from Star Wars. That was it was the ground of all being. It was the energy that was vitalizing us. And when a person dies, the body is still there, and everything is still there, but something's missing, and that's that vital force. That's the organizing force that keeps the body functioning and regenerating throughout our whole life. I have a different perspective now. I believe that there's a conscious creator God that has created this realm and everything in it. I also believe that there's kind of an opposing force that is created like a matrix overlay, all kinds of illusions that we are taught are reality. So I would say that a metaphor I like to use is a tornado whipping through a sand dune, and you're not going to end up with a watchworks from this random explosive event. If you're walking down a beach and you see a pocket watch is open on the beach, and you can see the gears and the mechanisms, especially if it's still functioning, you would never assume that something just smashed all of that sand together and came up with this shiny functioning object. And I think that there's so
I
many
like that.
examples of this this majesty of creation that clearly has, in my opinion, the hand of a creator there. So yeah, it's brought me a lot closer to the creator, being aware of these things. And then um, after studying the mountain, I started looking at lots of different rocks and like, what is this really? Is this what we were taught? Is this what is this what they said it was? And why does this look like it was from the tissues of a creature, even though it's a stone? And I started to recognize a pattern in the stones that was reoccurring, that shouldn't have been there, based on just random chance and pieces breaking off of larger structures and eroding. And so I started to recognize that what I believe are petrified organs all around, and started gathering them, and made many videos on this subject, showing the telltale characteristics and how repetitive and specific they are, because it should be repeatable, it should be scalable, it should be specific. When it comes to this sort of thing, it's not like a true scientific experiment where you have a manipulable variable, because the rocks are the rocks, and whatever happened to them happened. I can't recreate that. Somebody might eventually be able to petrify a heart in a laboratory and turn it to stone. There were people in the 1800s that knew how to do that, and their secrets died with them. A guy named Girolamo Sagato, and another one named Bruni is the last name. Yeah, that's me showing my there you go. Yeah. So that's a very, very specific pattern, which I've shared with people over and over, that I could be wrong, but it matches the anatomy of a heart to a T. The blood vessel openings, the lines where the different folds of the heart meet together. When the heart contracts, there's a twisting vortexual contraction to the muscle fibers. And a lot of these stones that I gathered, when you look at them from the bottom, it has that twist like a propeller. And so that became a massive rabbit hole in and of itself, which led to me learning things about the heart that I never knew, and I was never taught in school. There's a cardiologist named Francisco Torrent Guasp, who was the discoverer of what's known as the myocardial ventricular band. And it's basically fancy Latin terminology for, if you take the heart and you open it up, you can unravel it, and it's one long band. And this was something that I was never shown or taught in school. That was a total mind blow when I learned it, because it changes everything we understand about not just the structure of the heart, but the function of the heart. And that the heart is actually it's two vortexes that are going opposite directions. And as the band contracts, it's actually functioning based on suction and vortex, not by a contraction and pushing the blood out to the blood vessels. And I didn't know anything about his theories. I didn't know that he had actually proven his theories. Proof that's a word you should use very cautiously. What is it? Outlandish claims require outlandish evidence. And this man dissected hearts for decades, thousands of hearts. He had a family practice. He was a cardiologist, and he didn't buy the prevailing story about the circulatory system and how our hearts function. And so he kept investigating that on his own for years and years. And eventually he discovered that if you boiled the heart and you carefully remove the fatty outer layer, that you could just basically bluntly, using your thumbs to dissect it, you could open this thing up. And when I saw that, it was just like, this is amazing, because I'd already been looking at the realm itself, and like, what is this place? What is the true shape? And the shape that I always come back to is the shape of the toroid, because it's in all magnets. Everything is growing with these spirals. All of our plants, the conch shells, it repeats itself all throughout nature. It's like the master shape. And so I realized, well, it makes perfect sense that the heart would also follow the same pattern. And so this man proved it, and he was definitely a rebel who was chastised and mocked by his colleagues for decades, and towards the end of his life, it started to take on some momentum, and he never won the Nobel Prize, which he should have. And ironically, I know cardiologists now, and this stuff is still not being taught in the curriculum for cardiology programs, which is insane. You've got people that are actually doing surgery on the heart, and they're cutting into hearts to change them, and they don't even understand the true structure of the heart. So
that's what I was just thinking. Don't put yourself in the hands of a heart surgeon. They have
not unless they know that it's a helical heart, and that it's basically a dual vortex, and so this is amazing. It's like, and our red blood cells, they tell us that they're shaped like a toroid, and they're moving through these structured waters. I think that what's happening is the blood is being electromagnetically propelled
instead of pumped.
It's not being pumped. It's
right.
being pulled through the system as a result of electrical potentials. That's out of my realm of expertise, but that was so incredible for me to learn. And it just it's like, wow, we've got this perpetual motion device right here. Actually, it's been Mandela affected. It's no longer here. It's over here now. It's still tilted, but we used to put our hands on our heart, for the Pledge of Allegiance, and my country 'tis of thee, and it's not there anymore. Kidneys changed position too.
Okay. One of our guests here, Michelle, would be very happy to hear you talk about that. For the most part, I've turned away from that. But
it's a controversial subject for many. But
it is another one of those polarizing that people fight over and stuff. So I end up just backing out of all of those arenas, and just try to stay in my lane, do my work, do what God tells me to do. And if I'm in the midst of all kinds of fighting, I can't find the time for creating and generating. So that's this has been a very interesting conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. There's I have a feeling we could go on, and no doubt you would be an amazing fit for the conference in the UK. So I would love to see if we could get you there. That would be fun. If anybody is, just as a little bit of a heads up, the name came in the other day. We're calling it Holy Shift with a WHO or W. So it's both holy and whole at the same time, even though it mangles the spelling of that word. Yeah. It's going to be really interesting, and it's funny. I've been taking some notes while you're talking, and my eye keeps going to the trickster. And there's something that guides me to just talk about that, since it was one of your favorite archetypes. It was also very much one of my favorite archetypes. I, in fact, did an entire directed studies for one of my years in anthropology on that exact figure, through through history, through art, through theater in particular was a very big part of that. And
that's interesting. You said theater at that moment, because I was thinking of theater at the exact moment you said it. So synchronicity there. I did a bit of theater in high school, and my favorite role that I played was the role of Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream. So there's your trickster, right? The mischievous sprite elf.
Exactly, the Hermes that I've always adopted that role of the trickster. It can be a couple of different expressions. One is the tricksters will do everything you're not supposed to, so people can see what happens when you do what you're not supposed to. They're literally the contrary. Or we know the people that come into every conversation and they have to say something against what you're saying. They have to. There's a hard wiring in them that needs to contradict what you've said. Even if they believe it, there's part of them that just wants to ruffle the feathers and play in that arena. And in my system, I include the trickster energy, even though I know it absolutely, deserves one of its own. But just for the sake of simplicity, I included it in my alchemist, because the alchemist turns, once enough healing has taken place and you can begin to use that trickster in a more purposeful way rather than the way that a rebel ruffles feathers for no good reason at all, just because they want to get a rise out of people or they want some bad attention, then you become more of a master in the trickster arena, and you can teach through that trickster energy and have people learn from you in a more than an intellectual way, let's say. So anyway, I just felt like I wanted to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Anything
thinking
more?
about the different stages of the truther journey, because we throw around the word truther and, being awake very flippantly, because
Yeah.
every time you wake up, yeah, I heard you in one of your presentations, you're talking about, the spiral is that you go through these different stages, and then you get to the final stage, which is peace, and then the next stage is apathy. Because you keep, you're not, you shouldn't be in a loop, but that's just the nature of things. And it I forgot what I was going to say about it, but
That's okay. We started on
it's
the trickster.
yeah,
Yeah,
the yeah,
that's
lost
all
it.
right. That's okay. There you go. We'll leave that one open ended. And yeah, that spiral, it's a really good thing, because what you're talking about, the heart, it's like two spirals going, right? The
Yeah, and
bands.
you've got the red and the blue, which is the opposition, and those are uniting in a singularity. Is from what I can tell, is that once it stops working, we stop working, and
Exactly.
the one of the things that's gone through since the very beginning of my channel to now is there's been such a high degree of synchronicity when it comes to my investigations and things that have revealed themselves to me, and things that I've found, and the timing of things lining up in ways that are just, the odds would be astronomical if there wasn't some kind of a hand at work or a providence or a little nudge like, hey, go in this direction. And that's accompanied every point of this journey. And so that's where it really is kind of like a photojournalistic bearing of the soul as I go through these different questions, and kind of doing it in the public sphere. One of the biggest synchronicities was that after I'd already made a bunch of the videos on the mountain, and then learned about the nature of the heart, which was utterly mind-blowing for me, I found out after watching documentaries on this cardiologist's life that he lived and worked out of his home through his whole career, and his home was on the foothills of Mont Go, this mountain that I had been investigating. So like the one guy in the entire world that really unlocked the Gordian knot, untied it, the great knot that Alexander comes up and slices it with his sword. That's kind of what Guasp did with the heart, but he was doing it very carefully. Whereas Alexander the Great just went through the whole knot, and now he was the king of Persia, I guess is how it worked. But Guasp was carefully dissecting, and eventually he figured out how to untie the knot, and that he did that right here on the mountain that I had been making all of these videos about. Was just unbelievable. And eventually I met his son, made a video about that as I showed him, presented him the stones. I've now met two doctors who have both worked with one of his good friends, who was the first person to start a heart transplant center in Spain, a guy named Manel Ballester. So I've met two people randomly, unrelated, that are both doctors and have both worked with this man who was good friends with Francisco Torrent Wasp. So there's just like, it's just been one thing after another. I've done entire streams on the subject of synchronicity. It's not always easy to interpret the meaning of the synchronicities, but when they happen, there's no doubt that something's happening. I've got live streams where I've just told stories. I think, you know, if I were to sum up like my, you know, what do I see myself doing if I were to, like, right now I'm in the, what's that stage of the hero's journey? Refusal of the call. I can
help you with that.
I've been, you know, I've had a lot going on both in my personal life and professionally, and then with this channel. And so I work in fits and starts. I always have. There's a lot of mulling over and thinking and pondering and taking in information, and then when I do something, it you know, it tends to go well and it happens pretty quickly, but it's not a consistent effort. So I think if it wasn't for the synchronicities and it wasn't for all of these taps on the shoulder that I've gotten, I would have, you know, finished what I did and then walked away from the whole thing. I'm very fickle in my mind when it comes to interests, and I get really interested in things and passionate about them for a while and explore them, and then I don't master them because I'm interested in something else that comes along. So that's kind of what's happened with this thing, is that I've been led to it, and I don't exactly understand what it all means, and I don't even know which things I'm right about and which things I'm not. But I try and be as intellectually honest as possible and methodical in my approach to examining this stuff. And I think that's what people have appreciated about what I've done on the channel. That I'm not trying to shove ideas down their throats and make lots of grandiose claims. I'm saying, hey, this is what I've been looking at. This is what I found. You can decide for yourself if there's anything to it. Just one last little thing with the heartstones is I had already been gathering a bunch of heartstones and making videos about them before I ever came across the work of Guasp. And when I saw this video documenting his life and he unraveled the heart and he rolled it back up, at the point where he rolls it up, there's these meeting points of the different fibers that go in different directions. And those are called sulcus lines. And when I saw that, I realized that many of the stones that I had gathered already had those lines, but I never realized that there was a uniformity to them, that there was a repeatability. And so I went out to, you know, I got the stones and I started pulling them out of the closet and looking at them again. I'm like, holy shit, these lines are in the right place and they're curving the right way. Like, it was just one more like check off the box on that one. And then later I realized that you could look at them from the bottom and you could see, because I saw videos of the heart actually contracting, and it does this little dance when it's contracting, and that the stones, they've got that on them as well. So it's just you know, and that led to all kinds of questions like, how can this be, and why would these be outside of the body, and no trace of the body? How is this possible? And so that's led to all of these other questions, and some I've found answers to, and others I'm like, maybe someday we'll know.
Yeah, just on the subject of synchronicity, that it's, you know, call it breadcrumbs from God, right? That's we do need signs if you go along and there's no magic of any kind. I don't like the word magic very much anymore, but you know, there's no spark, there's no like, oh wow, I was just looking for that and then this whole thing came my way, or oh, 3 people sent me information on the same thing today, or oh, I met Mike Wilkerson at several points, and oh look, he's in Spain and we're looking for speakers in in Europe at least, and so yeah, those synchronicities are super beautiful and important, and they seem to as if come and go, and a lot of people will get attached to them, like they want that, and they call it the flow state, like it's a state of mind to be achieved. And I don't think it's like that. I think that you know, in your co-partnership with God, you are braving and risking the acceptance of the call rather than the refusal of the call. And it's the acceptance of the call that brings in the synchronicities, because it's like walking off a plank. Sometimes I've had that exact vision where I am blind, but I'm walking anyway, and going, okay, God, are you with me on this one? Can't see where I'm going at all. And then there's little clue here, little clue there. Some of the clues don't lead anywhere except to the knowledge that that's not the path. That's the synchronicity.
I was just going to say exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a
Yeah.
crazy synchronicity that was related to Graham Hancock. Before I met Alex and started contemplating that the world might not be what we were taught, I was deep into, the alternative theories that Hancock was promoting on, Joe Rogan and in his books. And this whole idea of the comet strike and the Younger Dryas and all of these ideas that I found very interesting and compelling. And so he was coming out with a new book that I pre-ordered. It was the only time in my life that I ever pre-ordered a book. And then some time later, I came across a video of, it was about Tesla meeting Swami Vivekananda, and the two of them having like a pretty profound interaction that affected Tesla in many ways, because Vivekananda was bringing this Vedic, Hindu science and philosophy to the table, and that was lining up with all of the things that Tesla was discovering on his own, apparently. So I found this little video. It was like 10 minutes long, and I thought, oh, this is something Graham Hancock would be really interested in, and I had him on Facebook, but not as a private friend. He had like 5 million followers at that point. And so I just shot off the link and said, hey, I think you might like this as a private message to him. And some weeks later, I was seeing patients, and I finished with one, the doorbell rang, I buzzed in the person. And at the moment I buzzed in the person, I was checking my messages on Facebook, and I saw that I'd gotten a message from Graham Hancock. And I was like, what? So I clicked on the message at the same moment that I was buzzing in this person. And he was just thanking me. It was a very kind little message. I really appreciated that. That was interesting. And that he took the time to, send this person a message. I was really surprised by that. And so then I went up to go answer the door, and I answered the door, and it was a guy bringing the Amazon delivery, which was the book that I had pre-ordered like 3 or 4 months before that I had forgotten about. So at the same moment that I opened a private message from Graham Hancock, a human hand delivered his book to me at the exact same moment. Like, how do you calculate something like that? And so, that would be like, okay, there's truth here. And that you get led down this rabbit hole. Well, a lot of the stuff that he says nowadays is couched in a cosmological model I no longer believe in. And so I question a whole lot of the things that he says in a way that I didn't before when I was reading his books and watching his interviews. So that was kind of like getting to what you were just saying a moment ago, is that it's like sometimes it takes you down a path so that you learn things that you then let go of, because as you move on to something else. And there's been a lot of times like that where I think, synchronicities have happened that have been crazy, and you think it might mean one thing and it turns out to not mean that at all. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a synchronicity or that it didn't have some importance, right. But it's not always easy to interpret. And that's been a real challenge through the whole thing. So, but I do keep a journal of them and make note of them, because I like that they happen, because it's outside of, the use of psychedelics, which I did in my youth. It's the only real examples of supernaturality that I've experienced in my life, where, it's like you can't even begin to calculate the odds on some of these things. If anyone's curious about that, I've got a stream called Synchronicity Stream, and it's spelled STREEM for the tree part, because a lot of the synchronicities have happened as I've gone into these investigations about the trees and the mountain and the heartstones. They're fun stories.
Nice. Yeah, I thought if I could see that really quickly, I would put a link up. But
It's on the live. It's on the
it's on
live
the
tab.
live tab.
Some of the best videos that I've done are the live streams, and they're longer. David Weiss once asked Alex, he's like, does that guy know how to tell a short story? And the answer is no.
This is the one you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I'll just grab that link.
Yeah, there are some crazy stories in there. And that's one of the things that when it comes to, like the tale with the hacking and the book, that hopefully I'll get my shit together and get that out in the next few months. But the stories are so wild that they don't need embellishing. When I was in my teens and insecure, I would exaggerate, and pad the numbers and, to make whatever I was saying more interesting. And then by about 18, 19, I didn't have to do that anymore because the stories I had to tell were so bizarre already. And that's just continued to be the case.
That's so fun. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. And paying attention to them is definitely a way to honor them, and the transmission that we might call it transmission. That's really just the mistaken difference between something that was thought of and something that was revealed. And they're not even really separate worlds also, because there is no thought without the mind of God, that it always is in fact generated from that source, but it can be filtered through so many layers of programming that it's your thought literally is unrecognizable as being sourced from God. And that's where the work that I do comes in, helping people to get those layers out of the way so they can just see more and more clearly, and how God is always speaking, not just to us, but through us, and saying, like, how was it that I would say a word while you were thinking it, and just giving us those little clues that we're not separate from each other, even though we're separated by an entire continent across the ocean. And you're in a totally different time zone and climate and everything like that, but here we are having the same thought at the same time. That's fascinating. That's just, to me, evidence of the sacred source of our being. And
2 weeks ago, I went for a hike with one of my patients, and he asked me before, is it okay if I bring a friend along? His friend was from Bulgaria visiting, and we started talking, and at one point I mentioned that, I have a friend who lives in Bulgaria, lives in the capital city, Sofia. And we continued our hike. And then at the end of the hike, I was like, I should introduce you to my friend. And I said my friend's name, and he did a double take. He's like, he's a Dutch guy who lives in Sofia. His name is Barich. And it turned out that they knew each other, and they had once traveled together and had a really remarkable experience together. And like literally the only guy that I knew in the entire country of 6 million people, and this guy that I'm randomly taking a walk with happens to have traveled with him 12 years ago, and they lost touch. And I ended up being able to put them back in touch with each other, because one moved off to Denmark, and they just fell apart. So I mean, what a crazy thing. That kind of thing is happening all the time. So I hope that means I'm on the right track.
I like what Lamb Chop said, God winking with us, not at us, but with us. That's very nice. I like that. And Michelle said something nice here. Authenticity and disclaimers are appreciated, and she enjoys their interesting perspective. So that's very good. Thanks for being here, Michelle. And thank you for being here. Yeah, thank you for being here, Mike. I've really thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Feel free to call on me if there's anything that becomes your next hot topic. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's one of the myths about sacred purpose, is that it's one thing. Well, like, there is a poem by Rumi that I quote in my book, and it says, "There is one thing in this world you must never forget. If you remember everything else and forget this one thing, it will. Ah, darn! I'm used to singing it, so the words kind of. It will be like nothing. But if you
Mm.
forget everything else and remember this one thing, you will have. Darn! The singing really helps me remember the words.
Go
Can't
ahead,
remember.
sing it.
But, oh yeah, okay. So there is one thing in this world you must never forget to do. If you forget everything else and not this, there's nothing to worry about. But if you remember everything else and forget this one thing, you will something it will. I need a guitar now. Darn it, how my senses are all coordinated. It will be
Put you on the
something
spot. I'm sorry.
that nothing. Yeah, something to the effect of it will be just nothing. And so the point, so I really ruminated and studied, speaking of Rumi, on this point of the one thing. What is the one thing? And people, oh, well, I'm a chiropractor and that's my purpose. Or I'm a, this or that and that's my purpose. To me, that is absolutely false and by design meant to make us feel defeated and locked in and not have access to the huge array of skills and passions and talents that make up a purposeful life. And how, I feel like I've been on the thread of my purpose for many, many years, especially, well, actually, only consciously since I thought I was going to die and I didn't. And then, oh, I'm here for something, I would have called it. But in reality, the thread of that purpose is the willingness to be on the journey and to take the risks and to continue growing and have your eye on bringing the elixir back to the people, whatever it is that you've got that has benefited your life. Then you're always saying, okay, God, how do I do that next level? And to me, that is a path of purpose. I do offer a whole course in it, the Find Your Sacred Purpose, mostly to demystify. And really all it is taking the layers off of what's next, God. Because it's right there for you. It's just when we see it through all those program layers, then it becomes invisible. So anyway, there you go. I almost got the
I
song.
have. You mentioned Rumi, and there's a very, very short little poem by him that I love. It's out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. There is a field. I'll meet you there. I love that one. And then I don't know if you're familiar with this poem by Emily Dickinson. I don't know the title of it, but it's short and it's perfect for this channel and the theme of your work. It goes, we never know how high we are until we are asked to rise. And then if we be true to plan, our statures touch the skies. The heroism we recite would be a daily thing, did not ourselves the cubits warp for fear to be a king.
Nice, beautiful. That's it. So
Have you heard
interesting.
that before?
No, I'm familiar with Emily Dickinson, but and you can see how it plays into the ascension theory about rising, and that's part of my bandwagon. Why am I on that bandwagon? I don't know. It's part of that thread of purpose God pushed up in me to talk on that subject. I'm not the only one, but yeah, and the king, how it is seems to be a pinnacle experience. And yet there is more beyond that. There is higher than the king. That's the alchemist. And there's more beyond that. That is the child beginning again, knowing nothing again, going like, hello, I'm lost. What am I doing here? So there's always an up and there's always a down. But to me, the purpose of God exposing those maps to us is so that we can go through them to freedom. Because if we stay on that upward thing, it just keeps on exposing the lower. The tree can't grow higher without more roots. and you end up in a trap, going higher and higher, and in fact the lower becoming more and more invisible to you because you're blinded by high frequency, high energy. So anyway, that's my bandwagon that I've been on for a while now. And yeah, I hire myself, and then I'll probably forget about hiring myself for that job at some point because I'm more interested in other things. And I just thank you so much, Mike, for being here. It's been a super, super pleasant conversation. I had a feeling it was a series of synchronicities that got me on your channel and looking at your stuff and like, oh, he's in Spain. All right. Like, let's seek him out. So
yeah, I
meet
wish
you.
we'd talk more in Mexico. It would have been, I remember there was one talk by the pool, and I guess you were in the room above me, or above Steve and I yeah.
Yeah, one above and
Someday.
adjacent. Yeah. It'll happen again. I have a feeling we'll have more
Yeah.
chances. So yeah, no, it's been super good. Is there anything coming up that you would like to let people know about, or anything you'd like to
Well,
promote?
I'm going to be attending Music in Sky
Yeah.
in June. That is the 20th to the 24th.
Okay.
I'm excited about that,
Right.
presenting there. And then I'll visit my mom briefly in Southern California. And then, like I said before, I'll go on to Colorado, and I'll be traveling with Hangman for a week. And one of the things I'm cautious about making claims about stuff, but when it comes to things that you can know, I think that the great trees are one of the most important because there's so much evidence for them. It's really something that I feel you can know. Doesn't mean I know exactly how the world was and what it was like before things got taken down, but it's like with David Weiss. He's so passionate about what he does. He's not necessarily asserting a shape, but he's showing over and over again all the anomalous things that we were taught that aren't necessarily true. And the same goes for lots of different aspects of geology. There's a lot of things I think that have been hidden in plain sight. I coined the term paradigm blindness because I think that that's what all of us are suffering from in varying degrees, especially academics. The more educated a person is, the more likely they are to not realize how paradigm blind they are. They'll stick to their little niche, and not want to venture too far outside of their realm of expertise, because you don't do that. You don't step on the toes of your colleagues or your, but ultimately, I think there's a line that if they can get you asking the wrong questions, it doesn't matter what your answers are. And so when we're blinded by our paradigm, our questions they don't matter, because the foundations of the reality that we're believing in might not be true. So that's right. I think it's an incredibly valuable intellectual exercise to do the work, to go in like to earth shape or to trees or star forts or whatever, and steel man the arguments, not straw man, steel man. Because if you don't give that idea its day in the sun and try and figure out what is the strongest argument for something and then debunk that, you haven't really debunked anything. And so this is what you see continually when it comes to earth shape or alternative geology or whatever. There are all kinds of claims being made, and then evidence can be presented that goes against those claims, and that's all hand wave dismissed because we've already figured this out long ago, and tens of thousands of geologists couldn't possibly all be wrong, could they? You just want to believe you're special, that you've figured something out that nobody else did. Well, it's not that nobody else did. It's that over the last 100 years, we've all been brainwashed to believe a certain set of, what I consider lies about the nature of our reality. So the paradigm blindness is very real. And then, that leads to cognitive dissonance. And one last little thing I started to say before is there's a natural tendency as we're truthing to go into a proselytizing phase where you want to shove it down the throats of everyone around you and force them to open their eyes. And And I think that's a useless endeavor.
Mhm.
It's better to just ask questions and plant seeds and be gentle, because we're all at different stages when it comes to awakening, and I don't think we ever fully awaken.
Yes, indeed. And so, yeah, no, it's, I think awakening is just different. It's one of those subjects that has been completely mucked up for us and entrapped us in many ways. So,
Mm.
yeah, I think we're, all of those things were weaponized equally against us. No biases there. So I thank you so much, Mike. Please, everyone, do join his channel. If you go and sub there, I know he said, we were saying earlier how you go, and some days there's 2 subs when you heard that many people subscribed, and then there's two less. So you look and you refresh, and they're disappearing. And
No, my
same thing.
channel, I put out a lot of content the last year, and the growth has been pretty much at a standstill. So I touched a nerve, I think.
Yeah.
In the 5th Unveiling a Titan series, I show the before and afters of editing on Google Earth, where I was showing the eye and I was showing the ear, and going in depth into both of those caves. And one day I was in an interview and I was going to show this again, and it's all been blurred out. So I have the before and after, and I show how it used to look on Google Earth and how it looks now. So there are people that have been like, well, I was on the fence about this idea, but now I'm convinced, when they saw that, because it was just so obvious. It's been done by hand, and it's like, why just there? Of all the
Right.
places, so.
Right. My sincere apologies. I do actually need to start wrapping up now. I know we have more to talk about, and we'll probably have more opportunities as well. I want to make sure and let people know this will be a podcast. So in usually about 24 hours, you can catch it on Spotify or iTunes or anywhere if you prefer to download an audio. And I would encourage you also, yesterday I opened the door for the training that I'm going to be doing on Mike Wilkerson's current journey archetype called the Nurturer. And this is specific to the nurturer's pendulum swing, where they go from having a almost Olympic will to help everybody. And then they crash and they burn because they put themselves out too much. They deplete their own energy, don't take care of themselves one way or another. And they crash and say, everybody get away. I'm never helping anybody again. And then they recover from that trouble and they run and they help everybody again, and they get really high. There's such thing as a nurturer's high, which is a kind of fake dopamine and can be adrenaline rush. So I'm really committed to helping people. I know there's a lot of those in my world that suffer really consistently. Almost never anyone shows up on my door without some kind of nurturer blues or shadows going on. So I'm offering this May 15th. If you sign up right now, then you get immediate access to the Zoom materials, and that will be coming up. There will also be a course to follow on the whole thing, just because God kept telling me to do this, Mike, and it's even a little late coming. I've been saying this for a while, but now I'm just going to do it, and won't have to be on my deathbed going, I should have ran the nurturer course. even just for myself. Yeah, because I'm a strong nurturer, and I need to remember these things on a daily basis myself. Boundaries are gold.
I've learned to take more and more time for myself, to be in nature and to focus on, it's, as a chiropractor, your body is your means of helping people. So if you don't take care of it, you're screwed. So
I know it very, very well. So yeah, it might be an interesting training for you, and some very unusual things, highly nuanced. You can think it's just, people say, just say no when somebody asks you, just say no. That is not the cure by any means, and I'm going to be teaching why that is. All right, my dear. So I hope everybody has a beautiful rest of their day, and you got quite a jet going over, I think. So
I get mopeds going by here sometimes.
Oh, mopeds, not a jet.
Yeah.
Okay.
No jets, thankfully. Yeah.
All right. Well, God
Wonderful
bless you.
talking with you.
Thank you. You as well, Mike. Bye for now, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Take care.